Welcome, brave souls, to a night of mystery and terror. Are you ready to step into the darkness? Hold your breath, because tonight's story will haunt you long after the lights go out.
Echoed the machine in the empty back room by the door as my employee identification card swiped it. It was a long walk to my car. The restaurant I worked at was right on the beach. Basically on the water. Maybe 200 feet of coast separated the mangrove from the Atlantic Ocean, or probably even less. This meant I had to park pretty far away, because the only parking spots by the beach were paid parking. As usual, I wandered through the street-lit beachside town across silent roads to my Toyota Camry. But don't let the silence and inactivity of tourists fool you. An hour ago, I was up to my knees in orders, though we were only open till 9 on Tuesdays. And with the mangrove closed, pretty much everybody cleared off the beach. After all, we were open later than anything else out there in my puny town. I was still sweating from the busy night as I reached my car. It was covered with dew as the cool night air replaced the sweltering beachside heat of the day, and I leaned against the driver's side, pulling out my tips from the night. I thumbed through the bills, then added the tips I'd received on credit in my brain. $174. I nodded, pleased. Pretty good. I stuffed it back in my apron and got in the car. Now the usual question hit me. What the hell am I going to listen to? I went to Spotify and scrolled through my playlist, trying to find a song I was in the mood to hear. I'd heard all of them 100 times, though, and the radio wasn't any better. The only stations in town were pop and country, and I didn't want either. I sat there for probably about 5 minutes before I decided it didn't matter and just wanted to go home. But then I decided to check YouTube. Lots of niche music pops up on there, and maybe I'd find a hidden gem. But after a little longer searching, I determined the 25-minute drive in silence was preferable to wasting my time in the parking lot. I then noticed something under the recommended section. It was a live stream of music called Relax FM. I shrugged. I pressed it, and a moment later, a song I'd never heard before met my ears. I couldn't tell you the name, but the sound, it was haunting. The somberness of the piano captivated me, thematically and ever so slightly out of tune. And as the song went on, the strange ambience of the instruments and the singer's pained falsetto pulled me in. Damn, what is this? I thought. I like this. And just like that, my 25-minute drive home was filled with the quaint music of Relax FM. It played a mix of lo-fi hip-hop, smooth jazz, piano music, and, on occasion, an acoustic song. Most of the music wasn't popular. I'd heard almost none of it before. Since I felt like I'd heard every song in existence on my way home from work, this was quite the relief. When I got home that night, I was already addicted to it. My parents and brother were already asleep, and I swung by the kitchen, microwaving a bowl of ramen before heading up to my room. I sat behind my desk, blowing on the noodles to cool them down before I logged onto my computer. I pulled up Relax FM. Now that I wasn't driving, I noticed the video. On the screen before me was a picture of a girl. She had long, dark black hair and bright, calm blue eyes. Her skin was pale, like she'd never left the room in which she was pictured. And she was leaning back in a chair, wearing a midnight blue crop top and black shorts. Her hair draped over her shoulders, coating her back as she relaxed. Her room was mostly normal, except for the fact outside the window on the left side of the screen, one could see she was in outer space. The moon was off in the corner, and the sky was alit with twinkling stars. The walls were metallic sterling, but were coated with posters here and there, and a lamp sat on the nightstand, cascading the room with a tranquil yellow glow that clashed with the blue light coming from the galaxy outside. It was almost a still picture, but parts of it were slowly moving. She blinked now and then. Also, she was typing on a keyboard at her desk. If I listened very, very closely, I thought I might be able to hear her fingers tapping the keys. The stars outside were twinkling, and you could see the girl's stomach rise and flatten with every breath. I noticed on her desk was a book labeled Andrea's Diary. I sighed, studying the video. It was soothing to look at. Though this was obviously a hyper-realistic animation, the way she moved on occasion, like adjusting her seat or brushing her hair with the side of her fingers, made her almost seem real, like I was looking through a window into her room. I noticed a radio in the back of the room, as if the music playing from the video were coming from it. I'm glad I found this, I decided as the music lulled me into drowsiness. At last, I shut it off for the night and climbed into bed. The music I'd heard that night swirled around in my head, and I fell asleep in no time. That was the beginning of the very strange turn my life took. It started out so normal, just me listening to music on my way home from work. I didn't think it could have become so strange. As the week went on its slow progression to Friday, whenever I'd get out of school, I'd listen to Relax FM on my way to work. I didn't really listen to anything else anymore. It was like it hypnotized me or something. And speaking of hypnotizing me, Andrea, the girl in the video, she was starting to feel like someone I knew. I know this is embarrassing, seriously, but I was pretty lonely at the time. I had my best friend, my parents, and my younger brother, and that was about it. I didn't have any girls in my life, and I contribute that mostly to how I was starting to feel. Most of the time, when I wasn't listening to the station, I tried to ignore those awkward thoughts. The idea that I was starting to fall in love with a girl in a video, but when I was alone in my car, on the peaceful drives home from work, or awake in my room late at night, lying in bed listening to it, I couldn't deny it. I felt like I was getting to know her, like the songs were her, and they made me feel good, so it was like she made me feel good. Yeah, it's cringy, I know. That's what loneliness does to a man. And trust me, I wasn't thrilled about this, and I really tried my best to pretend it wasn't happening, but Andrea, that girl in the video, she was pulling me in, and I couldn't help it. I started feeling so weird that I looked into it myself, the science behind how a rational human being can feel an attraction to a character in a TV show or book. From what I could find, your brain doesn't really determine the difference between characters and people, between pixels, pages, and skin. Your brain is pretty easily fooled. Think about, for instance, the main character of a show you watched growing up. When you think back to that character, you feel like you love them, almost like they're your friend, but they aren't real, and never were. And you know that, but you still love them. You literally love them the way you love your real friends. At least, subconsciously, you do. When you aren't applying the filter of practicality and understanding of the fact that they are fictional, in the pure and utter sense of the feeling, you love them the same way. The same thing with your favorite couple on a TV show. You found them adorable, and when they kissed for the first time, you felt butterflies in your own heart. Sometimes you think to yourself, I wish I had a relationship like that. But they don't have a relationship. They aren't real, and neither is their love. However, your brain can't tell the difference. That was kind of how this was. Yeah, Andrea was just a girl in a video, but my brain didn't know the difference. She had a body and a face, and the music was her attitude, her spirit. She was completely enough to trick my lonely self. But still, I was a rational 17-year-old guy. If I wasn't in a trance by myself listening to the music. Ugh. I cringed at the thought of me feeling that way. I knew it was asinine and awkward to say the least. I definitely didn't mention it to my friends or family. When Friday came, my friend Adley and I hung out pretty much all night just gaming together. I didn't listen to the station at all. Instead, we listened to our regular mix of classic rock and post-hardcore that accompanied our conquests in the game. This is where I started to feel awkward. As much as Relax FM wouldn't suit what we were doing, I wanted to see Andrea. I felt humiliated at the thought. I began having wished I could text her, like Adley was texting his girlfriend between games. I wished I could call her that night. It falsely excited me to think about, but she was fake. A GIF on a screen.
Yo, Tommy.
Adley grinned, nudging my shoulder.
You alright there, man?
Yeah.
Bro, you're Katie's ass tonight.
I know. I guess I'm just kind of off in my own world tonight.
Why is that?
The match ended, and I glanced at the scoreboard, noticing I came in second to last on our team with 7 kills and 20 deaths. Trash. Adley sat up, facing me. He had dark features and a strong sincerity in his eyes.
Something going on, man?
No. Well, I mean, besides the usual, just lonely, I guess. You know?
Bro, I told you before, girls ain't that big of a deal. You don't need a girl to be happy.
And right there, I realized I was worse off than I'd originally thought. I wanted to tell him about Andrea. I actually wanted to share with him that I was attracted to some girl on a YouTube live stream. Explain to him how I felt like I really knew her, how she felt real, how I felt like I just wished I could talk to her. I made sure not to mention any of it. At least I was sane enough to do that. I know, Adley, it's nice to have company sometimes, you know? Adley's phone lit up, revealing a text from his girlfriend, Cheyenne. "Babe," it said. We chuckled, and I said, "See, like that, the company. I wish I had a girl to text right now. Just makes everything so much more interesting."
You'll have that again. Don't get so worked up about it.
"I don't get it," I went on, figuring Adley didn't want to hear it, but I had to get it off my chest. It's not like I'm some shy loser. I talk my ass off. Everywhere we go, I try to get to know people. I'm never awkward in social situations, I think, anyway. He conceded with a nod, to my relief. Hell, if I think a girl's pretty, I talk to her, but it never works out. They always just say they're my friend in the end, and then ignore me unless I hit them up.
It's the town, man. Girls here like college guys, not moron parkerists that can't shut up to save their own life.
I laughed bittersweetly. It was funny, but he was also right. My mind went back to Andrea. She was always there. Every time I looked up Relax FM, I'd find her. She didn't leave me on red. She didn't look awkward to see me, glancing left and right when I talked to her in person, as if to make sure no one else was watching. She didn't hit me up first or invite me to places, but she couldn't. She was stuck in the computer, after all, so I couldn't be mad at her for that. And somehow I felt like if she could, she would. Around 11 o'clock, Adley drove over to his girlfriend's house, and I was left alone. Usually, I hated when he left. The night went from fun and distracting, playing video games with my best friend, to lonely and eye-opening. I'd sit there thinking about how this was a Friday night, and I wasn't at a party or with my girlfriend, but alone in my room, doing nothing. But tonight, I was happy he left, because now I could go on to Relax FM. I shut off all the lights in my room. I sat down at the desk, feeling the cool breeze from the ceiling fan as I typed it into the search bar. I started to feel butterflies, like I was about to call my crush. When I clicked on the video, I noticed two things out of the ordinary. One, instead of typing on her computer, she was sitting up, scribbling something into her diary. Secondly, unlike the usual 230 or so people watching, I was the only one. The only listener on Relax FM. This really surprised me. Now, it really felt personal, like it was just me and her. This is when I got really carried away. I decided to talk to her. I felt incredibly apprehensive at first, but as the music drugged my ability to consider the actualities of the situation, I let my emotions take over. The song playing was called Memory, from some 90s anime. A rainy mood was added into the background, making it sound like a storm was quietly brewing in the distance. Hey, Andrea, I began. It's me, Tony. I've been listening to your music for about a week now. And I like it. Good taste in music. It's really different from what I'm used to hearing. I paused, overwhelmed with shame that I was doing this, but I swallowed it. I knew that I could really enjoy this moment if I got past the embarrassment. I refused to think about it and continued. I know you can't talk, but that's all right. I'm getting to know you through your music. I like how calm you are. Honestly, when I'm leaving work at night, I just look forward to seeing you. I cringed again. I pushed through the humiliation. Really, you just calm me down. No matter how stupid the night is, Look, I know you're not real, but it's like, to me, you are. I wish the YouTube account behind the video wasn't simply called Relax FM. I hope that maybe the girl was the actual content creator, and her name was really Andrea. After all, the girl was realistic enough to be an actual person, maybe just with some sort of video filter. And if that were the case, then maybe I could reach out to her. But at the same time, I was glad that wasn't the case. What if I did, and the girl didn't actually act the way I thought she would, or she didn't like me at all, like a lot of girls do? I talked to her a little longer that night, but the music calmed me down to the point that I decided I should get some sleep. This was really unusual for me. Most of the time I'd be up well into the night on the weekends, bored and watching YouTube videos to get my mind off life, but Andrea had relaxed me to the point that I just wanted to lie in bed and dream about her. I climbed under the covers and simply listened to Relax FM, thinking of her. I imagined her next to me, wished I could hold her. Before long, I was off into a peaceful sleep. That morning, something very strange and beautiful happened. Just as I woke up, the song playing on my computer abruptly skipped. I thought it strange because I had never heard anything like that happen on Relax FM. It was always a steady stream of music with no interruptions or crashes. I sat up and walked over to the computer. The song playing was called Good Morning, Handsome. I caught my breath. Good morning, Andrea, I whispered. What are the odds? I thought. That song just happened to start playing right when I woke up, and the other song ended so suddenly, like she had changed the song. I won't lie, I was slightly creeped out. At the same time, though, I was ecstatic and flattered. It was like she said something to me, like she complimented me. I sat there and basked in the beautiful 9 a.m. sunlight shining through my window, sitting in the chair at my desk and listening to the song. It was a beautiful acoustic song, and the singer had a bright, peppy female voice. It sounded so lovely. It actually began to fill my heart with butterflies. I glanced at Andrea. She was lying on her back in bed this time, her raven black hair strewn about all along the mattress beside her. Her eyes shut calmly. For the first time, I saw a smile on her face. It was slight, but it was there. And still, I was the only one watching. I smiled at her. Good morning, Andrea. Quite a bit of time went by until the next strange occurrence happened. In the meantime, Relax FM became part of my day-to-day life. I was still mysteriously the only one tuned into the video, and after the good morning incident, I didn't feel any more apprehension. I talked to her pretty much every night about my day, and I listened to the station all the time. On the way to school, on the way to work, on my way home. It was nonstop. And honestly, I was a happier person. I felt fulfilled. I didn't feel lonely at all anymore. And I wasn't even bombarded with embarrassment when I was alone and thought about her. She felt so real to me. Anyway, sometime in September, I was doing a school project. It was in my American history class, and we were in the computer lab to work on our presentations. We had a substitute teacher that day, and I figured he wouldn't give me hell for listening to music, since he was a pretty laid-back guy. I plugged in my headphones and went to YouTube. I typed in Relax FM. It didn't pull up. There were other unrelated videos, but it was nowhere to be found. No. I gasped, horrified. No. Where'd she go? I scrolled up and down relentlessly. I couldn't believe it. I searched all over, even retyping it pointlessly, but it didn't pull up. It was nowhere to be found. I was totally crushed. I could barely even focus on the presentation as I logged into my email and pulled up my PowerPoint. I tried to start working on it, but I couldn't. I was too crushed. I went back to YouTube. I was so desperate to type it in again. I gasped in relief as it pulled up. I clicked on it instantly, and the music completely soothed my worry. I started to think about how strange it was that I couldn't find it initially. Why was it missing for a second? I contemplated it when I realized something. It pulled up when I was logged into my account, and was nowhere to be found when I wasn't. I sat back in my chair. Is that... No. I decided to test it. I closed the browser and logged out. Sure enough, when I searched for it on YouTube, it was mysteriously absent. Now I began to consider that I was the only one ever listening. An amalgamation of dread creeping up my spine and utter excited disbelief overcame me. I didn't know what to think about it. I hadn't added it to a playlist or even subscribed to Relax FM. There wasn't any reason it should be linked to my account at all. I started to consider how the views went from around 230 to 1. It was night and day. One day it was a group of people, and the next day it was only me. And it was only me since. I'm the only one that can find this video, I said to myself. My mind went back to the morning that song skipped. It was all starting to feel deliberate. I'd never felt such a duality in my life. A good part of me was absolutely terrified. I started to almost feel watched. And then another part of me was beaming. It was like Andrea was real. She was influencing reality. She was part of real life. I now started to think that I should tell Adley. But would he get it? Well, maybe I'd just not describe how I felt about Andrea. I'd just tell him about it objectively and see what he thought. That afternoon, we met up after school. It was a rare day off from work, and we did what we usually did on weekend afternoons, parkour. We drove to his house after school, each in our separate cars, and he left his in his driveway so we could head downtown in mine. He played some upbeat music on the radio, and it was the first time I hadn't listened to Relax FM in my car in God knows how long. When we got downtown, we parked off by the train tracks, and our spree began. We darted through the alleys like phantoms, jumping off walls, scaling pipes, tic-tacking over trash cans, and rolling onto concrete from falls. We made especially sure to always look out for cops and store owners, but there wasn't a lot of either on this side of town. We were just at the outskirts of the ghetto, and the buildings were run-down parkour's paradise. At last, around 7 o'clock, we took a break on the roof of the community event building. It was a pretty large structure reserved for local functions, community meetings, and the like, and stood 4 stories off the ground. We each bought sodas from the gas station down the block, and didn't open them for a little while so they wouldn't spray us, considering how shaken up they'd gotten. As Adley opened his Dr. Pepper and took a fresh swig, I figured it was time to tell him. Hey, Adley, I faced him. Can I tell you about something kind of weird?
Yeah, sure, man.
He nodded, wiping soda foam from his lips and his jacket sleeve. So, I've been listening to this station on YouTube. It's called Relax FM. I found it on my way home from work a while ago. I've been listening to it pretty frequently.
So, what about it?
Well, some weird stuff's happened since I started listening to it. But, okay, so when I first found it, there was a little over 200 or so people watching it at any given time. But then one night, all of them stopped watching. I was the only one.
Huh?
Yeah, weird, right? I was the only one watching, and no one's ever watched it since. It happened overnight.
Yeah, that is weird.
Well, it gets weirder. So the other day, I tried to pull up the video while I was at school, working on a PowerPoint for Björk's class, and I couldn't find the video. I gave up and logged into my email to start working on my PowerPoint, then searched the video again, and boom, there it was. First result.
So, you couldn't find it until you searched on your account?
Yeah, and okay, so this one morning I listened to it when I went to sleep, and, well, it was still playing when I woke up. But right as I opened my eyes, the song instantly changed. I walked over to see what song was playing, and dude, it was called Good Morning. He started to chuckle. What, man?
Tony, come on. Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird, but not that weird.
I don't know, I think it's pretty strange. Why am I the only one who can find it? If they made the video private, I'm not even subscribed. And it just happened overnight. No one listens to it but me.
Yeah, that is a little bizarre. You hear anything weird while listening?
No, just really peaceful music.
Well, don't get too caught up in it then. I'm sure it makes sense somehow.
I didn't like that it was starting to creep me out. I really liked the way I felt about Andrea. I decided that Adley was right, and there wasn't anything going on with worrying about. I should enjoy the coincidences, because they made me feel like Andrea was really there. Sure enough, I continued to listen to the station daily. Andrea seemed to be livelier and livelier as time went on. When Halloween passed, she was dressed up like a black cat the entire day. She looked so cute. Now, with Christmas coming up, she was dressed like an elf. The coincidences with the song names didn't stop either. Sometimes it'd say something like, "You look beautiful today," and the next song would be something like, "You're too kind." Or I'd tell her I was having a bad day, and all the songs would be about cheering the listener up. One time, I told her I loved a song called "On My Way Home," and what do you know, it was the very next song that played. And I found her doing things more too. Instead of just staring her icy blue eyes into her computer screen while lackadaisically typing her keyboard, like when I first logged on, she was usually writing in her diary or even drawing. Sometimes when I was going to bed, I'd tell her goodnight, and the next time I looked at the computer, she'd be lying down in her bed, eyes closed, listening to the music with me. Sometimes she'd just stare off into space from her bedroom window. I loved when she did that. When she was just sitting up by the window, I could see every feature on her perfect skin. Her wavy black hair blanketed her petite shoulders, and she'd rest her cheeks in the palm of her hands with this queenly gaze fixed on the stars. It was breathtaking. I loved to watch her stomach gently rise and fall with her breathing. I loved the way her other hand lay on her smooth thighs, showing her polished black nails. I wanted nothing more than to sit in the chair next to her, throw my arm around her shoulder, stare at the stars myself, and just listen to the music with her. I was in love. Yeah, and I don't regret it either. It was beautiful being in love with Andrea. She intoxicated me. She had this way of just pulling me out of reality, into the stars with her. She'd make me feel this warmth all over my body, like the summer sun was rising from my very heart and warming me. It's something no tangible girl ever made me feel. When the school year was almost over, I'd formed such an attachment with her that I even mentioned it to Adley. I couldn't contain it anymore. I told him how she made me feel and how I felt like she was really there, even though she was obviously fake. Which I didn't know if I necessarily felt that last part, but I said it to him so he wouldn't be too concerned. He was a little uncomfortable about it, but supported me anyway, and would even jokingly call her my girlfriend, which I loved. On prom night, to my shock, instead of her usual crop top and shorts, she was adorned with a luxurious black dress. She looked, somehow, even more gorgeous than usual. She had these big pearl earrings in, and her eyes were just glowing. That whole night, the only thing that played on Relax FM was slow dance music. Damn, I wished I could dance with her. The day I told her Adley knew about my feelings, she was sitting at her desk on the computer. The next time I logged in, she was drawing. That night, I noticed something on her bedroom wall. When she was lying down to sleep, among all the posters and pictures, a heart was drawn, and in the middle it was A and T. It took my breath away to see that. I wondered if it had been there the whole time, so I looked at some of my screenshots that I had taken of her. It wasn't there in any of them. It was new. I showed Adley, and he was genuinely surprised by it, but still mostly under the belief that it was a weird coincidence, and that I was slightly crazy. Sometimes I even felt a little crazy, but I loved it. If loving Andrea made me crazy, then I was fine with crazy, because loving any other girl just made me feel disappointment at best and heartbreak at worst. But sometimes, a horrible thought would plague me. What did this matter anyway? What would come of this thing I had with Andrea? Because really, she was just an animation on a computer screen. And yeah, there have been some pretty wild and beautiful coincidences, but she couldn't really be alive, could she? And she couldn't really interact with me, right? I told her that once, that I felt bothered by the future, that our love could never be anything more than me talking to a screen about my life and listening to music and hoping for coincidences that made her feel real. And part of me just couldn't believe it, though, that she was fake. The A and T on the wall, Andrea and Tony, it had to be about us. It just had to. That was the conclusion I reached, but I just couldn't be sure. until July 2016. I remember that moment like it was this morning. I'll never forget that. It was late one night, around 2 or 3 in the morning on a Thursday. I was sitting at my computer like usual, listening to Relax FM, talking to Andrea about my life. I'm telling you, I avowed. My life is ridiculous. You have no idea. She was sitting back in her chair, her feet up at her desk, as she stared out at the cosmos as she had been for the past hour. But as I finished the sentence, her eyes quickly shifted to the side of her head before darting back, as if getting a glance at me. My heart froze. I felt utterly horrified and sat up at the computer, but like usual, it was a two-sided feeling. The other part of me was overwhelmed with this feeling that she was really listening. Andrea, are you listening? She said nothing, but now she looked different. She was still facing the window, but her eyes weren't focused on it. They were to the side of the glass, like she was trying to look occupied, but was really listening instead. I breathed heavily as I sat back down in the chair. Andrea, well, I'll continue. So, I noticed she was curling her left hand like she was anticipating something. I'd never seen her make a movement that subtle, that irrelevant to the animation she was doing. If her hand was moving, it had something to do with what she was doing. But that seemed like a reaction. Are you bothered that I'm talking about my love life? She was still and silent. Her hand was curled up, and she picked up her index finger with her thumbnail. Well, don't be. Andrea, you have nothing to be jealous of. Nothing at all. I grinned. Seriously, I've only ever had one girlfriend, and she cheated on me about a month after dating her with some stoner dude at my school. Don't feel bad. I don't care now. You know, like, at the time I was upset, but I shouldn't have been. She was stupid, and things didn't end up working out with her either. I saw her nose wrinkle, and instantly she let out a giggle. She swiftly recovered, staring plainly at the monitor. I froze, not being able to understand what to do next. I felt like I'd just seen a ghost, and being completely alone in my room this late amplified my fear. But also, she really responded. She was sentient. She was there. She was listening. I just didn't know how to react to it, but I didn't wonder anything anymore. She was definitely listening. Andrea, are you really there? Are you listening to me? Do you want to talk with me? Now I saw an even stranger look on her face. It wasn't like she was trying to hide an emotion. It was the opposite, like she was trying to react. She was trying to respond. That's it? I whispered. You're trying to communicate with me. You're there, and you can hear me. But you're bound by something that keeps you frozen, unresponsive. But sometimes, somehow, you can control yourself. You can show me that you're there. I smiled, realizing she didn't swiftly turn her eyes away in hopes I didn't notice. She turned her eyes away because the power took hold of her again. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I smiled tenderly at her through the screen. My life has been blessed ever since I found you. I know you want to talk with me, and I don't know what's stopping you, but I'll never doubt you again. I know you're there, and I'm not afraid. I'm not scared of you. I love you. I was overwhelmed with emotion as I noticed a tear slowly streaming down her soft cheek. Andrea, don't cry, I soothed. I froze as the next song played. It was called I Love You. Now I was tearing up. I shut my eyes, resting my head against the computer screen. All I could do was listen to the song, sob and breathe. All I could guess was that she was some kind of spirit that I couldn't comprehend, manifested in cyberspace, speaking through the language of music. And sometimes she was released from her spell and could break through the fourth wall, writing something indisputable on the wall and swiftly changing the track to something relevant to show that she was sentient. But other times she was bound by whatever power existed over her, and all she could do was exist in a limited frame and hope I didn't go away. Well, I wasn't going anywhere. I knew I couldn't tell Adley any of this. He wouldn't believe me, and neither would anybody else. And you know what? I didn't care. Not one bit. I was so happy to have her to talk to at the end of every day. I loved her music, the language she used to speak to me. Through her language, we conversed every day. On July 10th, I got a letter in the mail. The college I'd applied for accepted me. I was speechless, and the first thing I did was run upstairs and show her the letter. I ran downstairs and showed my mom. When I came back up the stairs, her usual blue crop top and black shorts were replaced with a red jersey and silver shorts. She was smiling smugly, looking out of the window into outer space. My school colors. I smiled at her. Most of the summer, I spent either hanging out with Adelaide or sitting behind the computer listening to Andrea's music. Her voice. Sometimes I'd just go on drives and enjoy it, talking with her from time to time, and other times focusing on what she'd had to say. We'd even taken up the habit of watching movies together. I'd play a movie on the computer, and she'd be facing hers, and I knew in my mind that wherever she was watching it too. But nothing too surreal happened again since that moment on July 6th. Though I felt fulfilled by her, there were times I was just overcome with longing. I wanted so badly to just be able to hear her voice, her laugh. I bet it was gorgeous, the prettiest laugh I'd ever hear. And if her laugh alone could give me butterflies, I could only imagine what her voice sounded like. It was so unfair that we couldn't really talk, or hell, that I couldn't hold her hand, that I couldn't really take her to the movies, that I couldn't pick her up from her house and have a dinner with her and her family and really take her to prom. It was miserable to consider. All I wanted was just one moment to really feel her skin, to be with her. On the day of August 8th, the summer was almost over. I was shipping off to college on the 11th, and it was my last Friday in town. I couldn't wait for the long, exciting nights of partying with Adley laying ahead of me, and most importantly, I was ecstatic that Andrea would be coming along for the ride with me. That night, on the 8th, I found myself lying on the roof of the local church, looking up at the stars and listening to Relax FM. I imagined Andrea's spaceship hovering around somewhere in the Milky Way, wishing I could just get beamed up into it. Andrea, I smiled. I wonder if you're up there. If you are, you gotta beam me up to you. I wish you'd beam me up to you so that we could spend the night together. That'd be amazing. I yawned. I was getting a lot more tired than I thought I would. So tired, I figured I'd take a nap before the drive home. I didn't even remember to set an alarm on my phone before I dozed off. And then it happened. I don't know if I was dreaming or not. I felt so awake. I was ascending into the night, surrounded by stars. The large, yellow, milky harvest moon was glowing with grandeur over the moonlit Florida groves, and I could feel the cool night air on my skin as I went higher and higher into the sky. At last, I could make out my destination. A spaceship, a long, sterling body hovering above the earth in the twinkling atmosphere. I was breathless as I noticed a part of it slide open, revealing a sort of port in the bottom side. I reached the entry, hovering into the spaceship, and it shut underneath me. Now I could see light down a very long, luminous corridor. At the very end of the hallway was a door. Underneath the door, flecks of yellow and blue light shimmered, painting the silvery walls around it. I walked over to the door, my hands trembling, my heart racing, my footsteps echoed softly in the corridor. But as I approached the door, I began to hear another sound. Music. There was no mistaking it. Relax FM. Now I was within 20 feet of the room. I could see words hanging from a sign on the door. The handwriting was all too familiar. It said, Andrea's room. I reached the door. Standing before it, my heart was fluttering, and my mind was racing. It slid open. An aroma of perfume met my nose, and I saw with my very eyes the same room I'd glanced through my computer screen for the last year of my life. I even saw the left side of the room that I couldn't usually see due to the angle. It was all there, right before my very eyes. And there, looking out into the shimmering night sky, was Andrea. She wore a midnight blue crop top and black shorts. Her gorgeous black hair streaked down her back and shoulders, and her flawless face rested in her smooth palm. I'm here. I began to chuckle, feeling a tear run down my face. Andrea! I heard her begin to giggle, the same giggle I'd just heard once before. She turned around. My heart stopped. For the first time, those perfect blue spheres of vibrant ice were locked with mine. She wasn't looking anywhere else. She was looking at me. She jumped up, running over to me. Before I knew it, her arms were clasped around me, and she was embracing me in a hug. I could feel her body warmth, her breath, her tears as they began to glide down her cheeks and onto my shoulder. I was crying too. We just stood there holding each other. I don't know how long that moment was. Time seemed to be non-existent during it. We were just suspended there in that moment, in that room, embracing one another. And then she stepped back and faced me.
Tony.
I couldn't believe how her voice made me feel. It absolutely intoxicated me, like fine wine or a view of Earth from outer space. It was incomprehensible to really hear it.
Listen, you need to go back now. Okay, my love?
No, I shook my head. That was too short.
I need you to leave, Tony.
She looked very serious, though also deeply saddened by the thought.
Tony, you need to leave now, love.
I don't understand, but... Okay, Andrea. I acquiesced. She stared into my eyes one last time.
Please. Please promise me you'll never leave me, Tony.
Her voice carried a slight tinge of desperation. Of course. Of course I'll never leave. I'm not going anywhere. I'm yours.
I promise. I'll see you again,
she assured with a poignant whisper. A tear streaked down her face. Slowly, her arms folded around my lower back, and before I knew it, she was holding me against her, kissing me. Our teary cheeks touched. Then she pulled back. She shivered. Her polished black fingernails traced up the wall on the left side of the room, reaching a button that had always been out of frame. Her palm rested on it. She looked down and shut her eyes. She pressed it. To my horror, the window launched open, and a vacuum force ripped me across the room. My hand slammed into the window pane on the way out, sending a shockwave of pain through my knuckles. I let out a shriek, but the moment I left the room, I was silenced. I was terrified as my body spun wildly, seeming to drift out into nowhere. Then I noticed the Earth was getting closer and closer, and before I knew it, I was back in Earth's orbit, and my spinning slowed to the point that I was still. I no longer sensed the freefall. Now it was like as if I were hovering down peacefully, and I could feel the cool night air on my skin again. When I began to make out my town, and I realized I was above it, a strange, overwhelming exhaustion came over me, and before I knew it, I was unconscious.
Hey, are you alright?
A voice met my ears. I opened my eyes, feeling the inception of a cluster headache as the sunlight ignited my pupils. I could make out a figure standing above me. Uh-huh.
He's responsive.
He spoke to someone, and the next thing I knew, I was being put on a gurney. Now I was a little nervous. I looked around and realized that, to my awe, I was outside the courthouse. That was at least an hour walk from the church. My car was nowhere to be seen in the area. How the hell? I pondered aloud as they put me in the back of an ambulance.
You're okay, Anthony.
The EMT assured.
Just take a deep breath or two for me. Do you know where you are right now?
It looks like I'm at the courthouse. I was at the church last night.
You don't know how you got here.
He asked as the door shut and the vehicle started. It was at that moment that I could remember being expelled from Andrea's room into the galaxy. And I wasn't telling him that.
You seem to be pretty cognizant, Anthony. But is it Anthony, or do you go by something else?
Tony.
Tony, I'm going to ask you this to cross my T's and dot my I's. Do you know your birthday?
When I answered his question and he knew I wasn't delirious, he began trying to walk me through the events of the night. I told him everything, except for the part about being pulled into outer space to meet my digital girlfriend. Though otherwise normal, I felt lethargic and my head was pounding. By the time I got to the hospital, I was unconscious again. When I awoke, it was nighttime. I was in a tiny hotel room, and the moon was shining through the open blinds. My mother and brother were there and jumped up to greet me as I became conscious. I told them I honestly didn't remember anything. One moment I was on the roof of the church, and the next I was waking up by the courthouse. The family seemed worried, but more just relieved I was okay. Then another man came into the room. When he entered, my mother nodded. She gave me a hug and said that he had some questions for me, and she'd be right outside. Like you'd guess from a 14-year-old, my brother tried to scare me by telling me he was from the Men in Black or something like that. The man was dressed in a suit and tie. He sat down in a chair by my bed and pulled out a badge.
I'm Agent Miranda with the CIA.
He spoke casually.
I need to talk with you about something, Tony.
Yeah? What's up?
Don't be nervous. You're safe now.
Safe now? I wondered. Was I in danger before?
Tony, I'll tell you straight. You were the victim of psychological warfare. You were part of an experiment.
What do you mean?
Are you familiar with a project called MK Ultra?
Yeah, a little.
It was an old project the CIA undertook back in the 50s. Nothing we're proud of today. The purpose of it was to lessen an individual's will to withhold information during interrogations, namely through mind control.
Mind control?
Yes. We abandoned the project in 1973 and have done no work with it or like it since. However, it seems that someone has been studying our work and implementing it again in the States.
What do you mean?
One of the experiments we undertook at the time was called Mona Lisa. It began with sensory deprivation. We'd lock a man in a room for extended periods of time with no access to light or sounds. He'd be fed 3 times a day, and that was it. The only thing in this chamber would be a television screen, which was off. Then, one day, about a week in, the television screen would turn on. There, on the screen, would be a girl. Feminine, attractive. A very satisfying image to the man who'd been locked away from civilization for a week. See, we were using nature's hypnosis, the most powerful manipulative force in the universe. Love. Attraction and love. She'd be mostly still. She'd be sewing or talking on the telephone, and there would be soothing music in the background. And somewhere in the room would be the woman's name, to increase the familiarity the man had with her. The men would begin to form relationships with these women. Though the Mona Lisas didn't converse back, the men, who were lonely and helpless, confided all of their suffering into these women. After around a week, the Mona Lisas would begin showing faint signs of attention to the prisoner. Occasionally, they'd glance at him or giggle at a joke. The men were ecstatic at this. These women were the only things keeping them sane, or at least not completely incoherent after a week of sensory deprivation. By the month's end, the men had formed such a trusting relationship with these women that they would tell her anything she asked. The sheer fact that she was speaking to them was enough for them to say anything. See, in their minds, it was as if they'd earned this right to speak with her. The gradual increase of her awareness was something they longed for, and with her talking, they never wanted her to go back to silence. It was like they forgot their mission, their past lives, everything, but the woman in front of them. They were brainwashed.
I was silent. It was almost exactly what I'd experienced with Andrea.
It seems that someone's uncovered this information and has been experimenting with it again. But they're taking a different approach than we did. Instead of locking someone away in a chamber, driving them to near insanity before captivating them with the Mona Lisa, this person worked a lot more carefully with you. I don't mean to be rude, but they selected a target with limited interaction with females, someone who felt lonely. And though it took a lot longer, eventually, They pulled you into the same state that the men in our experiments reached.
I was hypnotized? Brainwashed by some criminal somewhere?
So it seems. And they did something with you that even we weren't able to do. They made you walk.
Walk?
Walking was a term we had for brainwashing a person to the point we could control their movements. In most of our experiments, we couldn't make our subjects walk. It definitely never happened with Mona Lisa. But you, they did it with you. They made you walk all the way to the courthouse from First Baptist.
I was silent now. My entire body was covered with goosebumps.
We don't know if there's a reason they made you walk to the courthouse. They may have planned on making you attempt to retrieve some document or attack a police officer. Either way, you broke the trance before entering and passed out on the steps. When we found you, your headphones were still in your ears, but the video had been taken down.
I said nothing at all. My mind was spinning.
I'm going to talk with you more about this later, but right now, get some rest, Tony. At the very least, though, you deserve to know.
He got up to leave, but turned around when he reached the door.
Hey, don't be afraid. Now that you know the truth, they shouldn't have any control over you at all. Even back in the old CIA-run experiments, once the men saw real life again, they didn't care much for the Mona Lisas. You're okay.
I nodded when he left the room. I couldn't speak. I felt sick to my stomach as I contemplated everything that had occurred. I just couldn't believe I'd been brainwashed. That entire experience I had last night. Was it all programmed? Some sort of forced lucid dream? While I actually was mindlessly walking through the town to the courthouse? It had to have been. I let out a long, overwhelmed exhale, but then I noticed something. I slowly lifted my right hand, studying the knuckle on my index finger. It was purplish, like it had slammed into something. I instantly recalled being vacuumed out of Andrea's room, how my knuckle had crashed into the door. My mom came into the room alone. My brother was probably downstairs and getting something from the snack machine.
Are you okay, Tony?
Yeah, I don't know what to think about it all. She seemed to be at a loss for words. She sat down next to me, holding my hand and stroking it. Then she made a weird face and started to sniff me.
Tony, you smell like perfume. Were you with a girl last night?
Don't miss out on amazing content. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Join our community today.